are we as a society happy with what we're seeing with our youth? They're fat, they're sick, they're depressed. Like, is that a good outcome? I don't think so. And now I
Yeah.
know every generation since as far back as we can, document, has had a problem with the next generation. But man, is this next generation we have soft.
Welcome to Iron Summit, where we cover topics about health, fitness, and general performance through the eyes of former elite Division I wrestlers.
Welcome to Iron Summit. We got Joe De Sena, CEO and founder of Spartan, which is basically the world's leading endurance sports brand. He's a lifetime entrepreneur, doing a lot of different things, from building, multi-million-dollar pool businesses in college, starting a Wall Street trading firm, and then Spartan. Obviously, he's also a New York Times best-selling author and an endurance athlete. How you doing, Joe?
I'm fighting through every day. I'm as you would say, I'm in third period. There's 20 seconds left and I'm down by 5.
You're looking for a headlock.
I need something.
Hey, Joe, you've done a lot of crazy things in your life. So just want to start with kind of maybe how it began and how you kind of got this entrepreneurial spirit.
Where I got this entrepreneurial spirit.
Yep.
And it really comes from your environment. I think if young kids grew up around a bunch of wrestlers that went on to win gold medals and that earned them a lot of money and a nice house and a Mercedes, all the other young kids around the neighborhood would look up to those things and say, how do I get that? How do I act like that? Now, not every one of them would have the bug, but it would certainly inspire a bunch of young kids. In the neighborhood I grew up in, it wasn't wrestlers, it was wise guys and business owners. And so, and even the wise guys were business owners, right? They owned a bunch of businesses. They did a lot of illegal things, but they also did some legal things. But we, as young boys and girls in the neighborhood, we looked up to it. We saw the big houses, the nice cars, the rolls of $100 bills in their pockets, the respect that other people were giving those individuals, as well as walking into the pizza place, the bagel shop, the tire repair center, the tow truck company, the welding shop. Like if I walked into any of those businesses, they were typically second, third generation. Mom was making pasta sauce in the kitchen. She had a CB two-way radio. She was calling in tow truck orders at the same time she was cooking. So like if you grew up around that, that's who you became or you got left behind. So, every conversation and any lunch, breakfast, sit down, like it was all about business, every conversation from 5 years old. So that's what I learned. What else would I learn? I didn't learn how to wrestle.
So how did you take that, that entrepreneurial drive? You're watching the wise guys who definitely have a lot of that, but do it in, some questionable manners. But how did you take it and apply it to, became successful on Wall Street and then, later Spartan. Ryan told me you owned a restaurant in there. So you've done all these different things. How did you kind of take what you learned and do it a little differently?
Everybody owned a business. Like graduating in that neighborhood into your teenage, you had to have a hustle. You had to have some business, and the internet didn't exist back. People weren't doing businesses like they are today. Young kids weren't selling things, and so you had to physically create a store or sell stuff out of your garage, or run you buy a taxi cab medallion, whatever it is. So like you learn it and then you just do it. And my neighbor was the head of the Banana organized crime family. He saw me as a young kid with a little, hustle in my step. My parents were going through a divorce. And he said, come over on Saturday and clean my pool. I'll pay you $35. And that was the beginning. And I went over there and he sat me down and he said, listen, I'll guide you through this. I wasn't even 13 years old yet. He said, listen, if you're going to come over here and you're supposed to be here by 8 a.m., you got to be here by 7:45 because on time is late. And he said, even though I'm paying you to clean the pool, you should also clean the window, straighten up the lawn furniture, clean the shed, because you got to go above and beyond for me to recommend you to other people and for me to be satisfied with the service. And then he said the third thing, which is counterintuitive, especially coming from a wife. He said, "Let's don't ask for money. If you do a good job, you get paid. Never have your hand out." And that lesson, those three lessons really, really, have helped me tremendously in life. I didn't really know what I was getting when I got those lessons. I was 11 or 12. And then my dad was just, through like osmosis, was just pushing business and entrepreneurial information into my brain. Same with my uncle, everybody. But those three lessons, because of who that guy was, and he was my next door neighbor, they really sunk in. And he recommended me to another customer and another customer. Before you know it, I had the head of the Lucchese family, the head of the Gambino, like everybody was my customer. And then, how did I stay on the right track? My mind was definitely going in the wrong direction. Like I was seeing the houses and the cars, and I was making money, but not like they were. I didn't have that kind of money. And so I definitely started to slip in my brain and my thinking on how I could enter that life. And I remember I was with Miss Amuso, little Vic, who's still alive. He's in jail, became my friend. His wife, who's no longer alive. And I said, look, Barbara, I'd love to get in the karting business. My biggest customers had karting companies, garbage companies. And she was glamorous. She was like a movie star, literally like a 1950s kind of movie star. And they were a great customer. And he would give me $100 tips. He owed me $35 for the week. He gave me a $100 tip. He was another big boss. And she said, that life's not for you. And man, it really, coming from her, for whatever reason, you never know as a kid who's going to give you what lesson, what things you're going to hear, what things you're not going to listen to. But that was it. She said that. And don't forget, my dad for a decade kept saying, like, these guys, Joseph, they make all this money, but they can't spend it. Like all the energy, all the time that they put into that thing that they're doing. If you put in half that time into doing something legal, you'd make money that you can't spend. But it was my dad, so it was going in one ear and out the other. But when she said it, right? When she said it, and plus all that other, information from I guess it stuck. And that was that.
That's awesome. I think that's really cool. You kind of could have went two different paths. You went down the right path, but you also went from, I don't know, when I look back at like a lot of things I've seen that you've done, it seems like you had the courage to switch from industries to different industries. And so how do you go from like Wall Street, by maybe other people's definition of like super successful, like this is the perfect ideal situation, to, I don't know, maybe this was your feeling, but what I'm getting is like, maybe I wasn't fulfilled and let me go into Spartan and build this up and go into fitness and kind of your passion for, helping others and creating that tough environment that you talk about a lot.
It's an interesting question. And when you just asked it, I didn't realize that most human beings probably have a difficult time pivoting. Like imagine if you were wrestling for most of your upbringing, and then all of a sudden you found out that you're a really fast runner. But you got 8 years invested in wrestling. And you got a few years left in high school, and maybe you join the track team, you could really be a superstar. Probably hard to do. It's probably hard for people to pivot. It's never been hard for me. I'm always challenging my status quo. And it really drives my entire company and my family nuts because I'm willing to change anything on a dime. Like, right? I'm always pushing and pushing, and I'm saying, all right, here's what we have today in my mind. Here's what we're doing today, but maybe there's a better way. And every time I do that, it agitates folks.
Change is hard.
Change is hard, but for me, I saw that opportunity on Wall Street, and I sold the pool business. And then for me, I was on Wall Street and I saw that opportunity to do something I felt really passionate about, which was, around health and wellness. And I made that pivot.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk a lot about, the farm up in Vermont and kind of that red barn as a vision and having that picture on your trading firm desk. So do you think you always were going to go that way, or what was the final straw that basically was like, I'm done with this, I'm gonna pivot here and let me follow this passion and just burn the ships, go take this on?
Well, they say a woman can pull an entire naval fleet across an ocean. So, I went through 9/11. I watched the towers come down. I was a few feet away from that whole thing. So that definitely had an impact on me. I didn't feel great sitting on a desk every day dealing with all that nonsense. I met a woman and I wanted a farm. There was a moment in my life when my parents got divorced where I grew up in Ithaca, New York. I would go back and forth from Queens to Ithaca. And Ithaca was really the first place where I saw like big fields and red barns. And I don't know, I liked it. Most people I think like it. And
Mhm.
then I was back in the city and I was away from that, but I etched that in my brain. I also had some great moments on ski slopes, especially at Killington, Vermont. And so, it'd be like if you won, a huge wrestling tournament in some town somewhere, maybe that town would be etched in your brain. Right. And so I had a great couple of days skiing in Killington, Vermont. I had those great moments of childhood in Ithaca. I liked farms, and I just get the hell out of the city. So the crazy thing is, when I first met my wife, she was not interested in finding a farm. She got me a book, America's Greatest Barns. And the opening page on that book is our place, the place we ultimately bought.
Wow.
But that was a year later, and we weren't even looking. And like, the whole thing is so crazy because there's lots of barns in that book. There's lots of places you could have looked, and somehow across from her inscription is the place we ended up buying. And then Spartan was born, along with 4 children and some Scottish Highlander cows and some horses and some dogs. Yeah.
That's
So
I think that barn, like, also there's a lot with Max. You got some?
no, go ahead, Ryan.
So with that barn, you're talking a lot with kind of mentality with Spartan, and you have a big endurance background, doing a lot of Ironman stuff and a lot of like ultra events before starting Spartan. What do you think? Like, what's your inspiration behind like your death race, right? I think the death race is maybe we talk a little bit about it just so people are aware of what it is, but I think it's one of the most interesting things where it's like when I think about a death race, it sounds like, being a Navy SEAL and going through Hell Week, right? How did you come about with that, and what made you decide, like, was that barn kind of your pivotal place to do that? Because that's where the original death race is every year, right?
Yeah, I was first of all, I lived the death race, right? I watched a lot of people go away for 25 years. I saw people vanish, and then I was an entrepreneur for all these years. So that alone is a death race. My father used to say, being an entrepreneur, you got to have the stomach for it. I didn't understand it, but you really do. You're banging your head up against the wall every day. I'm then out there doing and competing in all these events. The people read about Goggins doing. I was in that same era of running around and bumping into him and doing these crazy things. And one event in particular was in Lake Placid. I was doing the Ironman, and it was torrential downpours, like crazy rain. And about half the field tapped out. Like, it was just too wet. And I was so furious. I said, it says Ironman. It doesn't say Ironman unless it's raining. I don't understand. You just got to deal with it, right? And so I said, I'm going to put on a race that's like no other race, that doesn't give you aid stations when you want them, that lies to you, that it does what life does to us, right? It gives you exactly what you don't need and takes from you what you do need, and right. And so Death Race was born. It was born on the farm in Vermont in the early 2000s, and the New York Times picked it up and did a story on it, and then it went a little viral back then. And so then all these TV producers showed up on our farm and wanted to, create a TV show. At the same time that was all going on, I was playing around with the Spartan idea and launched Spartan. Death Race would never get a lot of participation for obvious reasons. It could go on for, it really is Hell Week on steroids. But Spartan could get a lot of people because it's 3 miles, 8 miles, 13 miles. And so I was running them concurrently, and I would pull people over from Spartan unsuspectingly to do the Death Race. It happens once a year in June. It'll happen this year, and I got both of you guys signed up actually for
it. What's the dates on that?
It's end of June.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Ryan may have a wedding at that point. But so that, I mean, what I think is so cool about, I mean, the Death Race is kind of like the extreme version of it, but even the Spartan race is you have made a business out of people paying for their own suffering, which I love. And you talked about it a little bit, and I think it's really interesting because for Ryan and I, this is a 2-part question, but for Ryan and I, we grew up wrestling. We kind of got to love that suffering that way. I think combat sports are one of the best ways to kind of learn to love that suffering. But you didn't come from that background. You kind of like learned it through the entrepreneurial way, which, I have some entrepreneurial background myself and totally agree with you. It's definitely got to have a stomach for it. But how did you get so into, getting into this kind of these endurance events, and then learning how to love the suck, how to be comfortable being uncomfortable? Where'd that come from for you?
So I think, again, because I question myself, like, where did it come from, right? Because I didn't grow up wrestling, but in that neighborhood, if you saw people disappear, if you saw people go away for 25 years, as a young kid, you start thinking, am I tough enough? Right? Because that's the path, that's where we're going. Can I do that? And you question yourself. And I found myself, as crazy as this sounds, you guys will appreciate it, at a young age, like carrying rocks around the neighborhood and stuff. Like I was, taking cold showers and doing it. Like, I don't know, I was on my own journey at a very young age. And I worked a lot physically with my hands with that business, that swimming pool business. We started, doing patios and all kinds of construction. So I was working 14-hour days, 7 days a week with my hands. I didn't even know it. I was in an endurance event every day, a crazy endurance event. And people don't show up for work that are supposed to work. Like, it was a nightmare. But in addition to that, my mom found yoga, meditation, became a vegan, met a yogi who believed in long distance running and yoga and meditation. And although you wouldn't expect to learn endurance and crazy, health and wellness stuff from that, my mom fasted and was meditating for 30 days in her room once, like not eating for 30 days, right? This guru of hers that got her into all this crazy stuff put on a race in Queens called the Transcendence Run. It still exists today. It's a 3,100-mile run around a 1-mile loop. You just run around in circles for 50 to 60 days. So imagine being a young kid and people are getting, 25-year bids in jail. You're watching people once a year run 3,100 miles around a 1-mile loop. Like that stretches your brain as a young, like and by the way, the families you're seeing that run businesses work 7 days a week from 5 a.m. till 10 o'clock at night, running their pizza place, their tow truck bit. It's the ultimate endurance, this neighborhood, this place. So anyway, fast forward when I was on Wall Street and I bumped into somebody in a stairwell. The elevator was busted in the building. I had to walk up a bunch of flights, and I bumped into a guy who was fit as you guys, looked like you guys, carrying dumbbells up and down the stairs, and we started talking. And he was actually a cover of Men's Health fitness model. And he was telling me about these adventure races and this crazy stuff he does. And so I started training with him in the stairs, and I started doing these races. It was the early 90s and or maybe mid 90s. And I just fell in love with it. It was like those moments in Ithaca or Killington, Vermont skiing. It was so unbelievable, and I couldn't get enough of it. And if it was 3 hours or 24 hours, in my mind, it was like no big deal, man. I just did 10 years of construction work, like 7 days a week. Like there's nothing you can give me that. Like I watch people run 60 days in a row. My mom fasted for 30 days. Like 24 hours is no big deal. And so, so I was seeking the crazier the event, the more interested I was in testing myself, and did the Iditarod by foot in Alaska. I did Eco Challenge. I raced across Switzerland. I raced across Newfoundland. I did 10-mile swims. I did 21 Ironman. I did 50 ultras. I just went completely insane. The crazier it was, the more interested I was in it.
That's awesome.
That's so interesting. Go ahead, Max.
I was gonna joke, like you can either get that love for pain by growing up doing combat sports or growing up in Queens. It's those are the two options. I have one more kind of follow-on question to that, and this is something that interests me because Ryan and I know you're a huge supporter of the sport of wrestling. Your kids wrestle. How did you didn't grow? How did you come to like wrestling so much and become involved in that world?
I did not know anything about wrestling. No interest in those singlets at all. And the sport would be so much bigger if we could change the singlet. But we had children. We were on the farm in Vermont. Our oldest, who was probably 4. And I was watching Kill Bill. And I saw Uma Thurman in Kill Bill had a Kung Fu master training her. So I turned to my wife and I said, why don't we get a Kung Fu master? We'll hire a Kung Fu master. We'll bring the Kung Fu masters to the farm, and the Kung Fu master could train, Jack, our son, and maybe his brother. And so anyway, I found through my contacts in Queens, I found a Kung Fu master in China, didn't speak any English, brought him to the farm in Vermont, had him do 2-a-days every day, 7 days a week, because I was paying him. Didn't matter if we were on vacation. This guy was with us all the time. I was going to get my money's worth and train our children. And they were about 3 or 4 years in on this journey of Kung Fu, which really modern Kung Fu is very much like, it's almost like mat gymnastics. It's not, right? And so that's what they were basically doing, mat gymnastics. And I was at a dinner in New York with some Wall Street buddies, and I was bragging about what a badass dad I thought I was because I had a Kung Fu master. And they said, you're an idiot. I said, why? And they said, because you should have your kids in wrestling. Forget about Kung Fu. They said, we grew up next to a guy in Seattle whose dad was a Green Beret, and he had 2 boys, and he was a wrestler. And the Green Beret every day would make the wrestlers train in the basement in the dark, blindfolded. Because if they could wrestle in the dark, blindfolded, they'd be unbelievable when the lights were on. And for a decade, they did that, and the boys became really good wrestlers, really high-level wrestlers. And one of them became a coach at Stanford. And while he was a coach at Stanford, he had let some other club come in to wrestle his kids. And one of the club kids said, look, coach, I got nowhere to sleep tonight. I got locked out of my apartment. Do you mind if I sleep on the mat? And the coach said, don't be ridiculous. Take my couch. Here's the keys to my place. I'm going out with the other coaches. I'll be back like 1 a.m. I'll wake up in the morning. So that night, I don't know if you guys know this story, but that night, I guess this perpetrator, this guy sleeping on the couch, went into the coach's bedroom and stripped him down to his underwear, zip-tied his legs to a chair, zip-tied his hands behind his back, put a pillowcase over his head, put a revolver to his head, and was going to kill him. And the coach, muffled through the pillowcase over his head, said, "Can you shut the lights before you pull the trigger?" And the perpetrator obliged him. And because this guy had trained in the basement under his father's training in the dark, blindfolded, was able to disarm the perpetrator, pin him to the ground, and call 911 from behind his back. Stanford police broke the door down and found what looks like a scene from Pulp Fiction. I heard this story at that dinner on Wall Street with my Wall Street buddies. And I was like, I'm going to California tomorrow. Got my wife, literally jumped on a plane the next day, flew out to meet your buddy, the guy you know, Jay Jackson.
That's
And
crazy. Yeah.
I had to confirm if the story was true or not. And I actually roped Jay in to doing a Spartan race, which is another whole funny story. But we got to know each other. And I was like, man, this wrestling thing is so much better than Kung Fu. So I found some wrestling people like you guys. And what I learned at that time, what I didn't know, was unlike the kind of Kung Fu they were learning, the kids, wrestling requires a team. Like, you got to have a bunch of people in a room. It doesn't work.
Right.
You can't really do it on a farm in Vermont. And to make matters worse, I then moved with the family to, we had an opportunity to move around the world to build Spartan. We moved to Singapore for a year. We moved to Japan for a year. We lived in China for a little bit. We moved to, so for the next 3.5 years, after I learned about wrestling, we traveled the world, and I really couldn't get wrestling going. I did the best I could. I found a club in Japan. That's another whole crazy story. But when I came back, I went all in 7 days a week. Then the pandemic hit. Then it was like, then I was on my own because the kids weren't in school. Any coach I could find within 200 miles every day we were going to. And I was like a madman on a mission. So we wrestled. We made up for it during the pandemic. We went nuts.
That's
So,
awesome.
That's sweet. And I think something too, like with your story, is you had a lot of mentors in your life, but then you grew to, one, a father, right? Which is like the ultimate mentor. And then also your Spartan races has a sense of mentorship, and like you're trying to change 100 million people's lives, right? So how did you, obviously it was a pretty unique situation growing up in your household. But do you think of that the same as how you're trying to, I guess, mentor your kids and kind of the people that are following, the Spartan way? Do you think about that the same way? And how did you think about parenting growing up? I know we've talked about this a little bit, but how do you keep kids tough and build these tough?
well, I mean, the best thing we could do, first of all, it's important. No, people listening think I'm a nutcase, but just have an open mind to what I'm about to say. If this was the 1700s or the 1800s, I would say we need more couches. We need more penicillin. We need more popcorn, right? Like, life was really tough back then.
Yeah.
Life is not tough right now. For some of us it is, but for the first world, people like the three of us, like, life is way too easy. And our brains fight the suck. Our brains don't want to do hard things, so it makes it even worse. The more complacent we are, the more comfortable we are, the happier our brains are. So we live in this really cushy world. You get a dad like me, and I'm like, okay, we're going to push the other way. We're going to try to get them to live more like the 1700s. I'm going to make my kids work out every day. I'm going to make my kids eat healthy. I'm going to take them on long hikes, long swims. They ran marathons at 7 and 8 years old. Crazy stuff, right? But it's not that crazy. It's not like you could read, there's a great story of two boys. I got to find you the name. There's two boys that were kids to a dad who was friendly with Roosevelt, the president. They lived in Oklahoma. I think it's called the Oklahoma Boys. You can look it up. They were 8 and 10 years old. Okay. Dad was friends with Roosevelt. Dad says, listen, boys, I'm heading to Washington, D.C. I'm going to meet the president. Why don't you boys meet me there? Saddle up the horses and meet me there. The boys, 8 and 10 years old, rode horses from Oklahoma to Washington, D.C. and met with the president. So, like, and it's documented, me making the kids do burpees in an airport, or like, it's nothing. You know what I mean? Like I can't even get close to what life used to be like. And then the crazier thing is I'm saying this on social media. I'm saying this on the podcast. There is 50% of the population that is saying, you're a nutcase. You should have your kids relax more. You're pushing them too hard. Like, are we as a society happy with what we're seeing with our youth? They're fat, they're sick, they're depressed. Like, is that a good outcome? I don't think so. And now I
Yeah.
know every generation since as far back as we can, document has had a problem with the next generation. But man, is this next generation we have soft. They are soft.
No, Ryan and I talk about it all the time that, being able to train, it's at least, wrestling, lifting weights, running, at least you have something difficult. It's because we live in a world where everything is easy. Our problem is not scarcity, it's excess. So you have to look for the difficult things now, especially in the wonderful country of the United States, where everything is really ultimately great. So then you can use sports, physical challenges, kind of a way to find that difficulty. And that's also, back to kind of the original point, is that's what you're selling. The Spartan races, like, do something difficult. And it actually, and most people, I don't know, I'd like to find out from you, but I bet you a lot of people haven't done something difficult in a really long time, and are like, wow, that felt awesome. It's like a catalyst to go start doing difficult things more often.
1,000%. Like, the numbers are starting to explode again for us in a good way. And I was really nervous. I mean, the COVID nearly killed us. We should have tapped out 100 times, but somehow we've hung in there and fought through. And now the numbers are looking really, really good on a go forward basis, which is great. I'm still carrying a bit of a mess from COVID, but that's just like past stuff.
Mhm.
And I was shocked because I thought, even when I met you guys in California, like, this idea that people don't go to work anymore, they work from home, that could hurt us negatively, because if Ryan went and did an event, or was going to do an event this week, and he would talk to you and he would say, hey, come with us, and because you'd be in the office together, but you're not in the office anymore together, right? And I thought maybe it was going to negatively impact us, but I think because people are home, they're more complacent, they're more glued to their devices, it feels even better when they go do this. And it's very inexpensive entertainment. I mean, $100, $150 to go out, be around 9,000 people, feel alive. Like, be a little dramatic here, but like a cup of coffee these days is $100. Like,
Yeah, that's so true. I think, like, modern society is we're fighting this battle because, like you say, we avoid the suck. Like, that's what the humans are meant to look for, like the easiest way to do things. But it's a catch-22, because also what makes us feel fulfilled and good is doing challenging things. Like, the work is the win. So we're in this like weird catch-22. And I mean, that's just why I'm a huge fan of what you're doing, because you're giving people an opportunity to do something challenging and learn that, ultimately in life, the challenging things are the fulfilling things, whether it's, like Ryan asked, being a father, doing something hard, challenge physically, starting a business. That's what feels good, not sitting on the couch and eating popcorn.
1,000%.
Yeah, and then the other thing with you is you are balancing so many things at an impossible level. I think Spartan has blown up, and logistically, I mean, you guys are in 40 different countries. There's, millions of people, different teams, logistics, everything has to go right on these race days. How have you balanced all this? I mean, you got a bunch of different things. You got 4 kids, you got this family, your wife, you got a business, you got your own personal goals. So how do you think about balance, or at least performing these different things at a high level? Because it's not an easy thing to build one thing, and you're building 3 different things at once and doing so many different things at a high level. You're an author, all these other things that you add on top of this full-time job.
I don't know. As you're asking the question, I don't, I bubble up every day, every minute to what's most important at that moment. What do I have to deal with that's most pressing at that moment? I didn't think I was a good delegator, but I must be. I must be a pretty good delegator. I'm pretty good at getting people to do things they don't want to do. And I do let people run and make mistakes with, stuff because I can't do it. We can't do it alone. Yeah. They say if you want something done, give it to a busy person. I guess I just keep piling. There's a great saying, a guy, he wasn't a wrestler, but he was a football player, a really tough guy, hard worker. He says, don't worry about the horse, just load the wagon. And I guess that's my philosophy is just don't worry about it. Just give me more. I was on Wall Street, even in the pool business, I was just known to be that guy that like, it didn't matter what job you get. I just get it done. One way or another, we'd figure it out. I was telling one of my boys, he's got this little business where he sells used wrestling gear, and he had nationals coming up last week. And so they were 5 days late in shipping out their stuff. And I said, it's unacceptable. And they said, well, we had nationals, we had to change. I had to cut weight. I had to do these things. And I said, I used to work till midnight. If I promised a customer that job would be done by Saturday, like I worked 2 a.m. The job had to be done by Saturday because that's what I told them. And it's probably something that most of us haven't learned, or and I had big consequences back then. There were 2 things. This is really important for the podcast. One was the guys that I was doing business for would not be happy with me if I didn't get the job done. Think about who they were.
Yeah.
And then 2, the Japanese were kicking our ass as a country in business back then. Kicking our ass. They were better at everything. And I remember while I was at Cornell, I was taking some classes, and they were talking about, in search of excellence. Like, how do you find excellence in a company? And this idea of customer service, of doing whatever had to be done to keep that customer happy, remembering that the customer is always right, going above and beyond. It really stuck with me. There was a story about Nordstrom's. Nordstrom's had taken over an old Sears, and they were no longer selling stuff that Sears sold because it was a new company in an old building. And a customer that had bought tires from Sears years earlier came in to return the tires, even though Sears wasn't there anymore. Nordstrom's was there now. And Nordstrom's was like, no problem, and gave him the $800 back for the tires and took the tires back. That was 30 years ago. And I'm telling you guys a story about it. So the point is, like, if you take care of the customer, like, it pays back dividends like you can't imagine. So whether you have nationals, whether you're cutting weight, deliver on your promise.
Yeah, I love that. The personal accountability. And I think the thing that rings true with that, like for you, is you say that, but you believe that and you live that every day. And I can't believe that you are so responsive and you follow through on stuff so quickly with how busy you are. I mean, you have an impossible schedule, but you get it all done. And so how do you think about prioritizing things when you have a lot of things stacking up like that? Because you can't be in 100 different places at once. You got a bunch of fires you're putting out every day. So how do you keep that accountability factor? Well, this empire has grown bigger and bigger.
I don't call it an empire. I try never to call it an. I don't know many empires that have lasted, so let's not call it an empire. Let's call it a job. I have an assistant. The assistant helps me keep my shit together, but I think there's a smarter way to do it, and I do have to get smarter. I have to pivot, like we talked about earlier. I have to figure out whether it's AI or whatever, and make sure that that my son's calling me, that I am not wasting time on the things that don't matter, because I do all of a sudden have stuff on my schedule, and I'm like, shit, I don't really want to do. I should be doing these other things. So I would say I am not doing it perfectly. I do need some more thought to go. Look, the last 3 years I've been putting out fires, just surviving. Last year it's just been survive. Now I'm getting back on offense, and I do have to be smarter about what. Look, I'm never going to be Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss, I love him. I know him well. This idea of a 4-hour work week is bullshit. Even he'll tell you. The name was just a good name for Google search. You know, I do have to prioritize and make sure I pick things that move the needle, but it's still an 80-hour work week. So
Yeah, just getting the work done.
yeah.
What and I think you may have already answered this, but I'll put you on the spot and add what one personality trait, mindset do you think is most important for being successful in business?
I would say, I just asked a buddy of mine who's a multi-billionaire, and he said resilience, right? It's that ability, that anti-fragility, that ability to take a punch every single day and to somehow get back on the mat. And oh my God, have we taken a lot of punches? There are a lot of moments in the last 3 years where I wanted to quit and pack it in. And, maybe it's because the boats were burned. Maybe it's because reputational risk, ego. I don't know. I don't know what it was, but we hung in there, and thankfully we did, because we're all of a sudden starting to win the match.
The last few years and how crazy it had to have been. Like, couldn't have been a worse thing to happen. The world shutting down for an in-person race company. Like I can't think of a worse situation. And so, do you think that just having passion and purpose about and basically just that alignment made you continue to fight through this? Like, what made you join this career and stick with this career? Because, like you said, you could pivot at any time. Right. But this is something that you truly care about. Truly, you're like, I'm just going to figure it out no matter what. So how do you think about, purpose in a career, maybe talking to a younger generation that's thinking about their career? You got put in an impossible situation that most people would have maybe been like, let me throw my hands up, switch to something else. But it's like, I care about this. I stuck through it. And I think part of the reason, and I don't want to answer the question for you, but it's like the amount of passion you have for what you're doing made it easier to put out all these fires and keep fighting every single day when you're fighting this uphill impossible battle.
Let me put it in perspective. So at the start of the pandemic, we had already sold $50 million worth of tickets to races that we couldn't deliver on because we got shut down. So that meant that all the people out there, 500,000 people, wanted to burn my house down. They had paid. They had
It's
paid
not
for,
funny, but it's funny.
They had paid for a ticket, and they had trained. And even though the government was saying cancel the races, Joe was evil. Spartan was evil. So I did the right thing based on all that training. We talked about customer service, etc. And I said, everybody's getting 2 tickets. So if you bought a ticket, I apologize. The world's going to open back up in a month. When it does, you now have 2 races. So I gave away $100 million worth of entries. What a lot of people don't understand is the business has to spend money every single day. It doesn't spend money on race day. It's paying salaries every week. It's buying insurance. It's moving trucks and trailers around. So I had already spent the $50 million that they wanted back. It was already gone, right? It was preparing for the races that I couldn't hold. When the world opened back up 2 years later for us, not 1 month later, I then had to go spend it again. I had to go stand everything back up, hire everybody back, get insurance, fire up the truck, move trucks and trailers around. And now spend it all again. When the customers came through the front door, I wasn't getting any money because we gave away $100 million worth of tickets. So the first $100 million, there was no money. Spent the money twice. So financially out of business by a factor of 10, 10 times out of business. Thank God the government had a program. We were able to borrow from the government, kept us alive, right?
Yep. Problem
was we burned through that in 16 minutes. That money was gone, and there was no more money. So I found myself against the wall. It would have been completely okay to file bankruptcy. Cirque du Soleil filed bankruptcy. They were a lot bigger than we were. They couldn't make it work. Everybody was in trouble. It would have been completely plausible, understandable. but I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. And yes, Ryan, there's a big purpose component to it. You know, whether it's Susie or John or Frank or you name the person that had been telling me over the last 20 years, you changed my life. I'm back with my husband. I'm back with my wife. I lost 200 pounds. I no longer do drugs. I no longer drink. I didn't kill myself because I found Spartan. So, you know, 50,000+ tattoos, hundreds of thousands of stories. I don't want to go bust. So I go online and I look up the Federal Reserve, the United States Federal Reserve. I find the phone number. I call them. I said, it's Joe from Spartan. I didn't know. I didn't think anybody would answer the Federal Reserve. I talked to some people. I told them my situation. And over the next 211 days, every day I went to bed not knowing if we would have a company the next day. For 211 days, I went back and forth with the Federal Reserve and we figured out a solution where we can get other financing. And, you know, I could say, yes, I was very lucky, but you do make your own luck. I mean, I made that phone call. I worked my ass off. I somehow, with my team, hung on for those 211 days and found investors that would come in and help us. And boom.
That's an incredible story. I think that's like, I love that. It fires me up. You know, I see Spartan all over all the time. I see bumper stickers. I see people wearing shirts, and like hearing stuff like that just gives me chills. One thing I'd like to talk about a little bit too is your mindset. Is like, I think in wrestling, there's times, you know, it gets really hard and you got to learn to like calm your mind and shut your mind off. Obviously you're really good at that. What do you think about when, I mean, you've done these ultra marathons, you've done these crazy races, but also, you know, going to bed every single night, not knowing if you're going to have a company. How do you calm your mind and basically keep putting one foot in front of the other? Because I think a lot of people deal with that now, where they don't do a good job of just leaning into that unknown. And so is there something you tell yourself? Is there something you do to calm your mind? Meditation, I know you've talked about a little bit. Or is that just something that naturally comes to you that you're just like, doesn't matter, I'm just going to wake up and keep working and put one foot in front of the other?
You know, I didn't understand when I first got into this many, many years ago that older people tend to have more endurance. You know, why is that? I was thinking about that 35 years ago. Why? Well, the reason is, as you get older, you realize all those things you were worried about, they didn't kill you. Somehow you survived them. You know, tomorrow, the sun rises tomorrow.
Yep.
And years ago, I found this story of a French paratrooper who they found dead in World War II in a field. And they found a prayer in his pocket. So we stole the prayer. We made it the Spartan prayer. And he basically was asking God, he said, God, everybody wants a hot meal, a shower. They want to get back with their girlfriend, back to their family. You probably don't have any of that left. So do me a favor, God. Give me the worst shit you got. Give me the storm, the torment, the pain, the suffering, and the strength to deal with it. And just promise me you keep it coming. And I got chills. I've said that prayer 500 times. I'm telling you, right? Like, and so when I'm in the thick of it, and I was just in 3 years of the thick of it, I just have to remember those things. I have to remember that prayer. I have to remember that we get to do this. I could be dead. I could be in jail for 25 years. I have my legs. I have my fingers. Like, whenever I'm alive, I'm alive. Like, hey, Joe, how you doing? How was the flight? Fucking landed.
I love that. Hey,
The
Joe,
plane landed.
one more thing, with, I guess you just constantly seeking knowledge, it seems like. I think, how do you think about that? Are you constantly looking to improve, or is this just through, you know, I think you're a great connector and you have, you know, a lot of conversations with a lot of different people, but you're constantly innovating. And I think that goes to show in your businesses, in your personal life.
I think the innovation goes back to the idea of champion challenger. Like, we have a current champion. I guess the great analogy for you guys in wrestling would be, we've got a champion in the room, and it's going to sound Darwinian and people are going to be pissed off, right? Like parents, including myself as a parent, right? But, you know, we got a 126 pounder and he's really good, but we're bringing in another one. We're going to challenge him. I mean, Goldman Sachs would always have two people running an area. My friend was the head of equity derivatives there, and he had a partner. He's like, I don't need a partner. We made a fortune last year. You're getting a partner. And you two are going to battle it out, and there's going to be a winner. And then we're going to get a new partner. And they're just constantly like Ryan, if you worked out this morning alone, you'd go to level 1. I'd go to level 1. You put us in the same room, we're both at level 3.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just keep that pressure on, and I keep that pressure on everything, and it drives everybody crazy. You obviously can't do that with your wife or husband. You're committed and that's it. There's no challenge or champion thing there. But like, and your kids are your kids. But in business, just constantly question your status quo. Never become complacent. Complacency is the death sentence.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think that's such an important thing in today's day and age, I think too. And I think it's kind of true to your values at Spartan. Like it's such a genius thing because I think so many people, especially athletes, you grow up, you do all these things, you're competitive your whole career, and then next thing you know, you're sitting at a desk job the whole time, and you're like, I don't have any like hard physical challenges in my life. And so people seek that out, and it's awesome that you're able to give an outlet for that. And I think it helps remind people like, oh, this work problem that I have sitting at my desk is not that big of a deal. I could be out, in storms, crawling through mud, throwing spears, doing a death race, and so I love that. I think you're doing an awesome job creating this environment where we're creating, hard humans and your passion for fitness. I absolutely love it. And then just your knowledge through everything and kind of looking to always gain new knowledge and pushing the envelope and changing is admirable. So I really appreciate it. I love that stuff. And it was absolute pleasure having you on. Is there anything else, Max or Joe, that you guys have?
I just want to, so I've been taking some notes, really enjoyed this conversation, Joe. And we have the mindset pillar of Iron Summit, which is, actually probably what we spend the most time talking about, even though Ryan and I want to start a podcast about physical fitness. We always end up back to mindset because, it's all downstream from there. But I kind of got my, we'll call it the 4 keys of mindset from Joe. And tell me if I miss anything, but it's resilience, gratitude, the plane landed, challenge, find challenge and competition, and don't become complacent.
Yeah. I think that's accurate. I definitely, I say to my kids, if you want to be successful, this is not necessarily mindset, but if you want to be successful, communicate like a movie star, work like an immigrant, and have gratitude like a monk. So yeah, I think it's the communication part is a network and learning and constantly, uncovering new things. The story of ancient Sparta, Lycurgus, who was a predecessor to Leonidas, the story is he traveled around, he learned a whole bunch of stuff from a bunch of other civilizations, a bunch of other societies, and brought them back in his, kind of like the Bruce Lee method, right? Where you learn a little bit from here, a little bit. So I communicate to a lot of people. I build a very wide network. I'm definitely super grateful, and I'm not afraid of work.
Love it.
Yep.
Love it. Awesome.
Let's end
Thank
it.
you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. You guys are awesome.